Going to be for a Monday? I say we start the week with some curly fries. Never a bad time to enjoy Jack in the Box, the newest $3 sauce and loaded curly fries with new slow smoked bacon. Available in two flavors, triple cheddar and spicy pepper jack. 710. Let's head into the KUAM News Zoom room on the link where we have standing by the Deputy of Public Health under Social Services, Terry Uggan, and Mayfei Moiko of the Child Protective Services here. Good morning. Good morning, Mayfei.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think Terry probably went to go grab a cup of coffee. Oh, there you are. Hi, Terry.
I'm here.
Good, good morning.
I'm here.
Right
Good
on.
morning.
Good morning. So thanks for joining us. Just a little update on, I guess, CPS. And I know that Melanie is still the DYA director. So we'll just kind of keep it on CPS. I just wanted to maybe start with the status of something we talk about every time we get her on, of those 1,000 complaints that had come down to CPS during the pandemic. Have we gotten to all of those, or what's the status on that?
As far as complaints coming down, you mean like the referrals coming into Child Protective Services? Seriously, on Guam, Child Protective Services receives around 1,300 referrals a year. And therefore, what we're trying to do is really beef up the number of staff that we have down there, like the investigators, the case managers, trying to make sure that we have enough staff to address the crises that is going on with the number of referrals. But what's concerning is the different types of referrals that do come in regarding the abuse of a child or children. And many of those referrals are actually drug related. So, back in the day when Lonnie and I were CPS workers, there were, quite a number of people coming in, but, the issues back then were more around heroin and cocaine in the 80s and the early 90s. Now, obviously we're seeing a lot more meth, a lot more concerns around harder drugs, chemical drugs that people get on and have a very difficult time recovering from or getting off of. So, you see large families where both parents actually are doing drugs, and what you're finding is their kids, especially when they live in certain areas, which may be kind of jungly, they're just sort of walking around, they're hanging out at neighbors' homes. They really are neglected, the concern around food or hygiene or whatever the case may be. And so we really are seeing a number of those cases. So, and I know today we're talking about everything from adoption and foster parenting. But really, I can't stress the point, the system is set up to handle, so many referrals. And it really is about beefing up the numbers of people that we have to do the work. But in the bigger picture of really trying to help the system, it is about recovery. It is about people learning how to do, effective discipline, not so much the hitting and the spanking or the pulling of the hair or the jerking, things that take place during a lot of what people think they're disciplining their child, but really learning more about things like timeout, things that are not emotionally and physically as harmful for the child. And so we have a lot of work to do around that. That's for sure. But it is ongoing, and the numbers, to me, they're staggering. And even during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, being PCOR 1, although the schools were closed, which is primarily the school counselors, the teachers, principals, the staff that usually make referrals, there was still a number of referrals coming in. And although the numbers of referrals coming in had dropped, in my opinion, they didn't drop that significantly. And so we really have, a lot of concern out there. We know that as schools open more and more, that the numbers of referrals will jump back up. And we really want to make sure that we have the staff on board to respond to it in a timely manner, and to really take the time with each case to make sure that the children and the families get the services that they need.
There was a story that we had in here. I think it was on KUAM News's Facebook page. Standby. Yeah, and Terry, I guess while I'm looking for this, can you because you said something there about effective discipline.
Yeah.
My generation, I felt like a lot of the discipline was effective, but I also feel like it was definitely abuse. But maybe it was just because I don't know, our parents didn't know better or something. But what is effective discipline here in 2021? What is allowed?
You
What
know,
is recommended?
and 2021, and granted, I'm a little bit old school, but I had the really good pleasure of overlooking a program called Project Carino um, for about 8 years, and it is a early childhood mental health program focusing on children newborn to 5 years of age. And I had the really good pleasure of also working with Dr. Lily Paris, who was the counselor with the program, and Lavina Camacho and Joe Beth Aquino. Anyway, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the energy, was around nurturing and loving children early on, helping them, identify with good positive energy. But part of that too is working with children who were coming into the system, and if a referral was made to Child Protective Services and the child was a foster child, they were removed because of threat to the child or neglect to the child, there were automatically a referral into Project Carino. And so Carino would work, with the child, and they would also work with the families. But it really is, that partnering and teaching people that instead of, in this case, we want to spare the rod, and we want to make sure that with children, very early on, you can talk a process through, or you can use the tools like timeout, and do so in a manner where you're not hurting the child physically, and you're really not hurting the child emotionally. It just becomes, it has a beginning and it has an end, and you're going to say, okay, we're going to do a timeout. It's going to be, for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it is, but it's really taking away something from a child that the child, may really like or benefit or want from. And so by just doing something as simple as that, the message to the child is the behavior, will not be tolerated. And yet at the same time, the discipline itself is very reasonable. It's not going to cause like this permanent scar, the way that some of our families are, really hauling off and hitting children, there, because I also had done some work with Shriners Hospitals for Children through public health at Medical Social Services. And Chris, we had a child that was brought in, and it was one of the cases where the mom's boyfriend was in the kitchen cooking, and it's one of those things where kids get out of the kitchen, I'm cooking, I'm this and that, and he was making a pot of soup and so forth, and the kids were playing, and kids will be children, and a little noisy, a little around the kitchen area, and the boyfriend had warned the child in whatever way, like probably yelling at them. But anyway, point is at some point he literally picked the child up and had not dipped, but actually inserted the child's, by picking the child up, the child's feet into the pot of hot boiling kadu. And it really, what it did to the child's flesh, when that child actually came in, and Shriners just happened to be here on Guam during that weekend. And by the way, they're here now, and we're doing a clinic at Guam Regional Medical City, and they are seeing over 500 children, which is incredible number. But anyway, point is the child was put in, and when the child, was stabilized to the hospital, and Shriners was here that week, Shriners itself is a pediatric orthopedic team out of Honolulu that's actually been doing services for Guam since the 1950s. And we've been doing telemedicine probably since 97 or so. And so they have a long history here. But I remember seeing the child's feet, and literally, the bone, the tissue, the muscle, the skin. And this was after the child was stabilized. This is after the child, had already undergone, being treated for this incredible wound. And it left, it doesn't just leave a scar for the child, because that's huge enough. But, all of us that were working in the clinic, have that that opportunity to see that and really want to stress to our parents, a lot of people can be a sperm donor, they can be a parent, they can whatever, but very very few of that actually go on to be, nurturing, loving, patient parenting, which is something that we don't get a chance to see very often at Child Protective Services.
Terry.
So, and I will do a shout out
Yeah.
to the different departments and nonprofit organizations that partner with Child Protective Services, and Guam Behavioral Health, those that are providing interventions for people who do substance abuse. Longstanding people like Karen Carpenter, who have done effective parenting classes through the University of Guam for a number of years, and even in her retirement years, she continues to be this incredible resource to the island of Guam. So, but the abuses, they can be very extreme, and the threat of a child having permanent harm, emotionally, physically, is there. It's something that they carry on. That child, a lifetime of struggling to overcome this kind of abuse. And we have children who are trying to overcome a lot of abuse, and they grow up, and many of them, want to be very opposite their parents, and they strive hard to be the best parents that they can be, while others fall into that system, that chain that's out there. Yep. And then this is the only type of abuse that they are discipline that they know.
Let me tell you, Terry, what I think is like the average person of my generation, because I grew up, it was routine. I mean, I got whooped with the tongan, the switch, the belt, the ballless, the casas, the iron cord, the Navy utility belt, the wooden slipper. I mean, it happened all the time. It happened all the time. So when you grow up and have your own kids, it's like, that's the last thing you want to do is use physical discipline. But then what ends up happening is your kids end up walking all over you.
Some people think they walk all over you, but the truth is children are always learning. And I would rather they be learning to be a loving, nurturing parent than to be this person who wants to be different from their parents as much as they want to be like their parents, but different in the sense of how their parent may have, grabbed a belt or a switch or a rod or something, they try and take away, more of what they don't want to be from their parents around that part. But then there are a lot of parents who were raised that way, and that's all they know. And as far as they're concerned, it worked for them. And therefore, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for their kids. And we have, in my roughly 40 years, in and out of public health, you really see the families. I mean, people will say a family name and they'll say, oh, from Agate, from Chigo, from Jonia, from whatever. And automatically that this is the family that had, issues around mental health, around physical discipline, the death of a child. I mean, those histories are longstanding in the area of social services. And we automatically say, oh, when you're going through the referral, you say, oh, look at the link. This is the granddaughter of the lady who did this and that. Yeah. And it's ongoing. Yeah. And Guam, like many places, has that. I hate to say guilty of, but we're guilty of having that. And we really depend upon groups like Child Protective Services, Medical Social Services, Guam Behavioral Health, the nonprofit organizations that are out there, those that are around early intervention, to really be that part of that intervention. And I will do a plug for the Guam Early Intervention Systems, because they're the ones that are really monitoring the development of children born to substance abusing mothers. And so you do get, babies that are drug exposed. They do the testing. The bad thing is it used to be we did drug testing on women that delivered. Now it's not every woman that delivers. It's those that either admit that they do drugs or those that have suspicious behaviors. Right. Which means there's a number of kids that, that are going to go undetected. And so drug exposed babies, we move forward with that, and these are children that we put into Guamra intervention. The truth of the matter is those children, many will have some level of neurological damage, and that's not obvious as an infant. And it really isn't until the child starts walking more, and then of course some children are more delayed than others. So it really doesn't really show up sometimes until a child is in like Head Start or in first grade, that you really see that the child's drug exposure may have really done a lot more damage than what is
Right.
obvious as an infant.
I want to read
And
this
so,
the story here from KUM.com. Terry Mayfay, woman who allegedly dragged teen by the hair, arrested. 62-year-old Rosemarie Cruz Guevara was arrested and charged with family violence as a misdemeanor. The victim reported the incident on April 21st. According to a magistrate's complaint, while arguing with the victim, Guevara allegedly grabbed the teen victim's hair, dragged her through the living room before punching her multiple times in the face. A witness in the home confirmed Guevara had pulled the teen by the hair and punched her in the face. She also admitted to police she dragged the teen by the hair to keep her from running away, court documents state.
yeah, it's amazing what's out there. When I was, in my 20s and doing child protective services, I would hear things like that, and I would, you want to rally around the child, make sure that they're in a better place. You really want to work with the parent who did the abuse to really hold them accountable. At the same time, let them know that there are different ways of working with their child. But in my older years, you just sort of want to beat the shit out of them, and you want to say, hey, if you could do this to your kid, guess what, when somebody does it to you? And sometimes I meet these abusers and I say, you know what, I hate to say, but when you're elderly, don't expect that kid that you beat the crap at, who's now taking care of you, to treat you any differently than what you're doing to that child now.
We had a comment, Terry, here. Back in the day, the discipline may be considered abuse now, but I feel that it was effective because love was still showed afterwards.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how we just interpret love however we interpret it, And, you do have children who have a long history of living in an abusive home. And yet when you take that child away, they long to go back to the only love that they know, but that love is very conditional love. You got to be that perfect kid, or guess what? You're going to get your hair pulled, you're going to be dragged across the living room, and you're going to be punched multiple times. That's not the message we want children to have. We want to be able to really work with kids. But see, Chris, I mean, seriously, there have got to be books and volumes of how parents have sexually abused, physically abused, mentally abused their children through the years. They're very serious and very scarring types of referrals. And, 1,300 referrals on average in the last 5 years. That's very telling. Some of those are repeated offenses, and some are not. Some are brand new. Some are like, over the last 5 years, they weren't doing, meth, but now they're doing it now, and, that whole recovery period, that whole process of trying to, break that chain once it's out there. The people I know that have a history of doing meth, they continue to crave it. They continue to think about it. Seriously, out of, 10 folks that I know, I'm very fortunate and blessed if even one of them, is able to break that chain. Some of them are just able to, to do things and kind of, I hate to say, but hide it well, but they do. They're like functioning meth users to some degree, but eventually, that's a burning crash scenario. So, but yeah, they do. They long to go back to what they know, and it's all they know. And then they get into more of a loving, nurturing home, and they're learning that that is not the way that it has to be. That, I grew up in a home where Vietnam War was going on. Dad was stationed, in numerous places. Mom was that parent, that had to be loving and be the disciplinary at the same time. And back in those days, even though we're military, it wasn't like they had a whole bunch of social services that are available, to your family. If you ran out of food, you ran out of food. Budget better. If you had a breakdown or moms that have, like postpartum depression, there wasn't a lot of interventions. Now the military has tons of that stuff, and it's very helpful for the military to stay on mission. But the truth of the matter is we went through what we went through with very little military support back in the days when we were kids. So, and I know I'm older than you, Chris. So, talking about spare the child, use the rod, or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
spare the rod, spoil the child is the saying, I think.
There's something like that.
Terry, let me tell you, one of my cousins, he wasn't showing a middle finger to any of my aunties or uncles, but he showed a middle finger to my other cousin. This is when we were kids. And one of my elder relatives took his finger and bent it back until he's like, and he didn't show middle finger again. Fast forward to 2021, a few weeks ago, one of my kids happened to show me the middle finger. It's a long story. But what I did was made him sit in the corner, face the wall, and then had him write. Well, it was supposed to be 500 times, but he only got to about 5. I will not show the middle finger to my father again. And this is one of my mother's favorite tactics. Because we would get our ass beat, no doubt, right? But then sometimes it would be like, get your ass beat, and then you're going to write 500 times, I will not tear up my progress report or, whatever it was. And it really just made you kind of think, right? But there is that fine line, and I think it's just, definitely not giving any parents out there a pass, but it's a struggle when you've got, parents who've got to work all the time. They come home, they're trying to discipline the kids, and it's like, sometimes timeout isn't enough. It doesn't work. Kids aren't even scared of time. My kids laugh at timeout. They're like, timeout? Bring it on. You know what I mean? So it's tough.
But you're right.
It's tough.
You're right. At different ages, there are a different level of intervention, and sort of that timeout is something that you'd be using, for a much younger child. And just what you mentioned about, writing 100 times, seriously, I remember that, when I was around 7 or 8, actually, because, and however that fits into, what you were working with. But I mean, I remember that I think back then when even teachers were doing that, it's trying to get you to practice your handwriting. I think it took, but the thing about it is, and it's like, the rights and wrongs around this, but, I had this trainer person once said to me, never use education as a form of discipline. But, I thought we're not. What we're doing is we're just practicing our handwriting.
He needed to work on his handwriting anyway. The kids now, they don't know. Right. They're all typing. They don't know how to do the handwriting. So there you go.
I tell you, man, when he gets his award for penmanship,
he's going to thank
something
me.
to be proud of.
Mayfei, let's go ahead. Let's close it out here, Mayfei, of course, with CPS. And by the way, I just want to say, when you talk about beefing up the investigators, our former reporter, Peter Santos, for the KUAM news team, is heading over to CPS as an investigator. And I got to tell you, he was and working here as a reporter, as a journalist, being able to report on issues. I felt like he was doing a really good job, kind of going in on these issues that are very relevant and important to people, and being able to make a difference with the stories he's doing. And we had a talk Friday, and he was saying that he feels like he's going to also be making an impact at CPS, but on a totally different level, right? Making an impact in terms of really, saving kids. It doesn't get any more altruistic than that, right?
Chris, you're right. It does not get any more intense than that. And to be honest with you, I only knew Peter before because it was this guy that kept popping up, and he'd sing like Frank Sinatra. And then one day somebody said, "Hey, that's Rose Regis's boy." And of course, Rose Regis worked at Child Protective Services for a number of years. And so when he expressed an interest, I thought, wow, it is, family to family. And he had quite a mentor that he can actually go home to. But I want to thank the fine people over at KUAM and really for, supporting Child Protective Services as you guys do, like for this interview, that, letting wonderful staff like Peter to transition over to public health, to Child Protective Services. I tell you, his experiences will continue to make him, the person who interviews the way he does.
Right.
And if he ever loops back, with this under his belt, if he ever loops back and gets into, media and, getting into public service announcements and so forth, he'll be the richer person for it, and he'll be really speaking from the heart. So I do thank you guys over there.
Yeah, Mayfei, let's go ahead. We'll close it out.
Hi, good morning.
Yes.
And I want to say thank you, Terry, for doing most of the interview. But before we close, I'm excited that Peter is coming. And as Terry had stated, that we just need more workers to let us do our job better. And we have gained a few new workers, and they're doing the best that they possibly can. And with that, and the referrals that we're touching, May is foster care month. The need for foster care is increasing on this island. It's definitely children, and I'm doing a shout out there that if anyone is interested in providing a loving home, even for emergency or temporary purposes, please call our office at 475-2653 or 2672. It's a rewarding experience to be a foster parent, and we could give you all the information that we possibly can and to guide you.
Mayfei, since May is Foster Parent Month, let's get someone on next week, and we'll just really go in on foster parenting. And obviously, there's just always a need for it. But, maybe we just need to go into more detail, because people probably have it in their mind one way, what it's like to be a foster parent. And maybe the reality is probably a little different. Terry, I can tell you got passionate about this. Thank you for coming on.
And,
of course,
I'm a licensed foster parent. So when you guys talk about foster parent, please invite me.
Yes,
right. Yes, we will.
The experience is really awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a juggling act, because May is Foster Parent Month, and then it's also mental health, something with Mental Health Month, because we're getting a lot of behavioral health and mental wellness folks in for that week. So we'll see you guys next week, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll see you. Good talk. I mean, especially generationally, because I feel like everyone who's my age was spanked, was disciplined, was, I guess, what we now call it, abused. And so it's just definitely always an interesting conversation, as reflected in our comments here. Glenn Lujan writes, "We all got spanked back in the day, and we turned out okay. Or did we?" Bevtest J. Solis also had commented, "Back in the day, discipline may be considered abuse now, but I feel it was effective because love was still showed afterward." I think Terry kind of went into that. Garenda St. Nicholas writes, "You discipline with love. You set limits and consequences without causing physical pain, and you explain to your child while it's happening." Bevtest J. Solis. Here's one from, I think all of
and
our.
remember back then they used to call it corporal punishment. I haven't heard that term like in a while.
Right,
We're certainly not making light of the situation.
Like you would get spanked at school. Like our principal had a paddle.
Oh no, my
kids, they cannot believe that. They're like, "Well, there's no way, Dad."
My principal at FB Leon Girl, when I went there, was a friend of my parents, and my parents even said, like if
give it to Jason Hart. He's on the go out.
Yeah, if Jason messes up, he was a family friend. It's like you have within reason.
Here's one from the blast from the past from Bev. "Kneeling down with books on both hands for sure was effective for me, and I never felt it was abuse because it was cause and effect of my actions."
I never got that one.
I feel attacked, Bev.
Okay, and again, we're not joking about this, Henry, because it is a real serious topic. But have you ever really been triggered by seeing a certain object later on in life, and just see an extension cord, or the wooden Zori, and just be you just have a moment when you shudder, and it's like, wow, that brought something back.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Francisco Camacho writes in, "Pain retains. Push-ups, squats, planks, hands in the air, run in place." Chamarita Regis writes, "Sometimes abuse does not happen in the home. It can be an abuse by being bullied and get carried to the home where the child retaliates to the parents." Very, very true. Okay, guys. Let's go ahead and go into the Zoom room now, where we're kind of getting backed up, but we did want to bring on the Chief Public Health Officer, Chima Mbakwe.